In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill, joined as always by columnist Chris Herrington. It's a road game for me today. Road game for me. We always mention where we're doing these from. Right. Sometimes we do crosstown concourse. Sometimes it's the office. A lot of times it's remote now, out of season with you up in Minnesota. We're in Germantown. We're in Germantown today.
We're at the Herrington satellite office. We're at my dad's place.
Yes, we are.
In Poplar Estates.
Natalie joked that it does feel a little bit like a high school project.
Right, yes.
Together,
who brought the poster board and the markers?
Who's got the poster board and the markers? Right. Who's taking care of the PowerPoint? But it's fun. We got some things to talk about. The draft is tomorrow, which is crazy. That sort of came up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
For those of us that are having insane summers. So obviously the Grizzlies now back in the draft. We did our draft podcast. I've gotten lots of response to that, by the way. People like the players that we brought up. So I think that
I just got a text literally just right now from the homie John Roser over at Grind City Media saying that he listened and he agrees with my take on Thomas Sorber.
Interesting. Okay. Parker Fleming texted. Chip Williams does a great job, but those guys are like draft obsessed. You can go check their content out too. They both are Colin Murray Boyles guys, the same way I am. I don't know if he's going to get there. Like, I don't know how many of these players are going to get there after last week. It feels like there's certainly momentum on certain players.
So I filed, we're speaking mid-morning on Monday, and I filed a column earlier this morning. They'll probably be up by the time people listen to this on the draft stuff. And I did take a look at, because a lot of the mock drafts updated, today and yesterday. And I would say the four best or most prominent media mocks, I would say, is Jonathan Givony and Jeremy Wu at ESPN, Sam Vecini at The Athletic, Kevin O'Connor now at Yahoo, and Jonathan Wasserman at Bleacher Report. And I looked at the draft range on the mocks, at least. They're only mocks, who knows, of different guys. And the draft range for Colin Murray Boyles in those mocks was 10 to 14. So no one has him quite there for the Grizzlies. But 14 is close to 16, so you never know.
What do we think is going to be the most important, factor for the Grizzlies when it comes to the draft? Because we've talked about in the past, do the Grizzlies have a draft type? Like, do they have the type of player that we think they often go after? And, there is a little bit of a history with some of these players. I think there's a history of efficient, experienced college players that rate well analytically, but then they've gone off that path a little bit. Like Zaire Williams was one of those picks. Gigi Jackson was another one that was not the best college player, but then turned out to, for a short period of time at least for one season, had that great rookie year. What do we think is priority this year for the Grizzlies?
It's hard to know. I mean, you're right. They've had a tendency for players to look at production-based stuff rather than measurement-based stuff or pedigree-based stuff. And they've had their best success, setting aside, John Morant was an obvious thing. Jaren was sort of an obvious thing. But they've had their greatest success with the guys who whose production pops in certain ways that, based on how they look at it. That's Brandon Clark, that's Desmond Bane, that's
Zach Edey,
that's Tillman, those kind of guys, right? But it's a little bit of a mystery box. I mean, there are certain stats that I look at that I feel like have a history of being better indicators. I'm guessing the Grizzlies look at a lot of the same stuff, but I don't know in what mix they look at it. I don't know what, it may vary player to player. But a guy like Colin Murray Boyles, he's a guy who some mocks have him, the 2-4 I looked at had him 10 to 14, but there are more like hardcore analyst types, to your point, like Parker, and others who have him as a top 5 pick, top 6 pick. John Hollinger, I think, has him 6. This is not a mock draft. This is a prospect ranking board. And so it's possible that the Grizzlies' internal stuff mirrors some of that public stuff, that they look at similar kind of things, right? But I don't think we can pinpoint a certain type or a certain position. This is not last year's draft where, they really needed to get a center. Their biggest need is small forward, but I don't think they're going to be married to that in the draft.
No, I don't think that they will be either. And I also just wonder, I was just bringing that up from the standpoint of, if we're putting players that are in that range, obviously we're still assuming the Grizzlies are going to use the pick here. There's a real chance that they don't. But what players fit in what buckets? Of the guys that we talked about last week. Colin Murray-Boyle is one of those, Xavier Tillman types that had defensive analytics really stand out. He's in that bucket. And I think there's the Cedric Coward types, which is in maybe a little bit of a different bucket because he's a little bit more of a mystery but has a higher upside. He fits more of the Zaire Williams sort of player archetype. So I'm very interested to see in which direction that the team goes, in part because of where the team stands right now. Are they going to try to draft a player that they think can help them next year? And is that or are they going to draft a player that's got the highest ceiling that 2 or 3 years from now has the potential to be an NBA All-Star?
I don't think they're going to focus, unlike last year. Again, not just positional, but in terms of immediate impact. I don't think their heavy focus is going to be the player we pick has to be a starter or a high rotation player immediately. I do think they were looking for that with Zach Edey. I don't think they're looking for that exactly, but I flip it the other way. Are they willing to take on a long-term project? Not this guy will take a year because rookies take a year, but would they be willing to draft Noah Asinge or Johan Berenger or one of these guys who literally might be a 3 or 4 year kind of thing, rolling the dice? I'm skeptical they would do that, but I don't think they're going to say, if they think, let's say Nick Clifford and Liam McNeely are 2 guys who are on the board at 16 in pretty much every mock, but they're gone by the early 20s, right? That's right in that range.
And
similar
I think
position.
Different players too.
And very different players. And so, and I have no idea who the Grizzlies like better of those 2 players. But if their internal stuff tells them that we think Liam McNeely is a better ultimate prospect than Nick Clifford, but Nick Clifford will help more immediately, and that I think they would take Liam McNeely. No, I have no idea what they think about those players. I'm just using that as an example. But I don't think they're going to be so focused on, 7-man rotation game 1 that they're going to overlook just getting the best talent they think they can get.
Overall, would you say that the draft tomorrow night is the Grizzlies' best chance at adding the best player this offseason? What I mean by that is the Grizzlies could draft a player that could have become an eventual All-Star, and they probably have less likelihood of trading for a player that's going to eventually become an All-Star. Or maybe you think it's the opposite. Maybe you think they could just trade for a guy who's an All-Star right now, given what they have, and that's the best avenue to add the best player.
It's an interesting question. I think their best chance to add a future All-Star is probably a year from now with that Phoenix pick.
Yeah, probably.
I think in terms of this season, I think they're more likely to add a better player through a trade, but they're probably more likely to add an ultimate star with this pick than with a trade, right? I wouldn't discount you could really pile up the assets. I mean, if you put that Phoenix pick in the mix, then maybe you're trading for someone you would call a star. But I think 16 is the kind of spot where if the right guy is there, you can take a swing for someone you think could be a big impact. What I'm interested in is where's the line for the Grizzlies in terms of their own, whatever their internal prospect rankings are, right? Where is the line at which they have a firm conviction, you can never know, but a firm conviction these guys are likely to be high level starting caliber players. Does that list for them end at 6? Does it end at 12? Does it end at 14? Whatever. And is there a player on that part of their board available at 16? If not, do you just pick somebody at 16 anyway who you don't feel that way about? Or is that the point where either you trade up to get one of those guys or you trade down to get off that contract? And that's sort of where I'm at with it. To me, if I can't get a player who is on that part of my board. We believe this guy's gonna be a high level starter, not just a role player. I want to get one of those guys. If I can stay at 16 and draft that guy, that's what I want to do. If I can't draft at 16 and get that guy, I'm looking to either trade up to get that guy or just trade back and get rid of the Conchar money and set up the Jaron thing. And if that guy is not going to be there at 16, that's, to me, I'm making that choice, You know
what's interesting too is like when we set up for the draft pod last week, we talked about how there were 8 guys that we just excluded off the top because there was no way. But there really was probably 3 or 4 more we could have.
Yeah, we could have taken Carter Bryant off the board.
Carter Bryant, yeah. And so the line does seem to be pretty, maybe a pick or 2 ahead of where the Grizzlies are, I think.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
I am.
When you're talking about that theoretical line that you just drew.
I don't remember whether I said this on the pod last week, but I put it in the column and I joked about it on Calkins' show. The terrible thing about this draft for the Grizzlies is that the San Antonio Spurs are picking 14 and the Oklahoma City Thunder are picking 15. 2 teams that, you're sort of, trying to compete with, and 2 of like the smartest teams in the league in your conference right above you. So whoever you want the Grizzlies to pick, those guys are going to go at 14 and 15 to the Spurs and Thunder. I'm convinced. So I don't know if I'm right about these guys. The guys I like, the guys we talked about in the pod, were Colin Murray-Boyles, Carter Bryant, Cedric Coward, and Thomas Sorber, not necessarily in that order. Those are the 4 guys I really like. I'm convinced all 4 of those guys are going to be gone. They're probably going to go 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? For me personally, if those guys are all gone, I'm either looking to trade up for one of those guys or I'm looking to trade back and like clear up the Conchar stuff and all of that. I'm not excited. Like I like Nick Clifford. I'm just not excited to take those guys at 16. But I don't know how the Grizzlies feel. Like they're who they think is going to be a potential high level starter maybe is more than likely not who I think, right?
I could envision them liking Nick Clifford.
Right.
He just fits in them.
Yeah. So maybe they think Nick Clifford. Like I read something today that compared him to like he could be Josh Hart. If you think he's going to be Josh Hart, great, take him at 16, right?
Yeah. No, but I'm of the opinion that it would be a big win for this team if they were able to trade back, let Brooklyn take on the Conchar contract.
Right.
You solve problems immediately for you this offseason before you get to the point where everybody's signing with everybody in free agency. You can file that away. You can solve that problem for yourself right now, and you could still end up with a first-round pick.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is move back 5, 6 spots
here's
in the
question.
draft, potentially,
let's
if Brooklyn's willing to do that.
Let's say they're doing a trade back with Brooklyn. Brooklyn's got picks at 19, I think 26, 27, and 36, right? So what's the trade back? Do you think you think they're taking Conchar just to go from 19 to 16?
Right.
Or do you think you have to go back?
So it's closer to 10. I said 8, 6, 7, 8.
Well, to me, if I'm going all the way back to 26, I want 26 and 27. Or at least 26 and 36 or something. I'm not trading 10 spots back and only that to get off Conchar. I'll find some other way. I'll waive and stretch him if I need to and then move, Jay Huff for a 2nd round pick. And
But for 19, I think that, again, like people, it's not going to be popular because people just want the best player available. But like if you're the Grizzlies and you have a chance to solve that, because the truth is that Conchar has negative value here, right? So like,
yes, it's not enormously negative value, but it is negative value.
Yes, but it's a negative value enough to where like it's a $6 million contract. So like, is a team going to take what's it going to take to get off of Conchar if you're the Grizzlies? Is it going to take a first round? Hopefully not, right? That would seem like a expensive price to get off a $6 million contract.
It has been my conviction that they should not, and I believe I'm going to squint. And I believe will not straight up move a first round pick to get off the money for the Jaron deal. Now, if you're moving from 16 down to 19, 16 to 26, that's not a straight up first round pick. Yeah, that's like a partial first round pick you're giving up, right? That's the equivalent of like 2 seconds or 3 seconds or that kind of thing. So that's, to me, I can live with that a little bit more, but I don't think they would just flat up, we'll trade you a protected 2028 first to take John Conchard's money. I don't think something like that's going to happen.
Yeah, that would be a very steep price. So my point is, I think that the best scenario for the Grizzlies in this draft, if that imaginary line that we've drawn of this is a player that's going to be a high level impact player, if the Grizzlies are beyond that line for them, the way that they view it,
right,
and there's not a big difference between who you're going to take at 16 or 19. And we all know Zach Kleiman doesn't pay attention to mock drafts worth a dang anyway.
Otherwise, he wouldn't take David Roddy in the first round.
Or Jake LaRavia,
or Santi Aldama.
Or Zaire Williams at 8, right? We could go back and forth all day. Everybody saw those picks as reaches, right? So, if that's the way that it is, it would be a massive win, in my opinion, to go back to 19, clear off a spot. Maybe there's a player that they like it. Who knows the way that they operate. Back at 26 and 27, is that what Brooklyn has? 26 and 27. Maybe there's a player that they like at 26 and 27 that they think that they would take at 16,
Noah Pinto is a guy I threw out on the pod. He's 30th in a lot of these mocks. The Ringer one that came out today, he's 23rd, 24th. But a lot of the mocks, he's 30th. But some of the more analyst guys, Hodger's got him around 20, and I think Stan Bassini had him inside the top 20. I don't know. Again, I got no idea. Maybe the Grizzlies have him as the 15th best player in the draft. You can trade back and take that guy or whoever, right?
Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. What else should we be looking out for trade wise? I know I want to talk the KD trade. I want to talk some other things, but trade wise for the Grizzlies between now and the end of the draft.
No, I think this is a good point because there's a lot of focus on Conchar, right? I will throw out 4 other players I would keep an eye on in terms of Grizzlies trades in the next few days. One is Cole Anthony, who I think was acquired to be traded probably. If he ends up on the roster in the season, that's fine. He's a good player, backcourt depth. But he was basically acquired to be traded.
It's expensive backcourt depth.
Yes, he was acquired to be traded. Now that could be, you attach one or multiple picks to him, or use that contract to take back a player. That's what I envision. But it's possible, you trade him for a player making less money, and that's how you clear some of this money for Jaren. That's a possibility too. And then the other 3 guys, one of whom I've mentioned, but I'll throw a couple out there, are Jay Huff and grab your chair depending on who you are. I'm going to grab mine for one of the names. Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams. Mm-hmm. These are guys who went unmentioned, as we've noted in Zach Kleiman's end of season session. He's throwing out Cam Spencer's name. He's not talking about Gigi and Vince and Jay Huff. They're all small contracts. They're all 2.3, 2.4 million, somewhere in that range. But it might be that the Conchar money's not quite enough. You need to cut just a little bit more. I think the easy way to do that is Jay Huff. I think Jay Huff probably has enough value. You can probably trade him for a second round pick. And I also think he's maybe not a great fit for the style of play Isolo wants to play. So I think that could easily happen. Jay Huff for pick 38 or whatever. I think that wouldn't surprise me at all.
I can see that for sure.
But I wonder about Gigi and Vince. I think their contracts are so low and they've demonstrated so much talent. I personally feel like trading either of them is selling low in a way that I would not do. But I wouldn't trade either of those guys for a second round pick. I just wouldn't do it. I think they're too good and they've shown too much. But I don't know, man. Is there still enough interest in Gigi based on what he did in the past? You could get a late first for him. I don't know. Is Gigi enough value to help you move up? Is there a certain team? I'm just going to make stuff up. Literally, please bear with me, people. I'm making this up. What if the Chicago Bulls really like Gigi Jackson? And they say, we'll give you the 12 for the 16 in Gigi, and we'll take a roll of dice on that, and 12 can get you the guy you don't think will be there at 16. I don't know whether Gigi has enough value to help you move up in a draft. But if he did, I wouldn't surprise me to see something like that.
Yeah, and the way last season went with Gigi feeling and sounding just uncomfortable.
If I'm other teams around the league, I'm trying to buy low on Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams right now.
Yeah. No. I would agree. And if you're the Grizzlies, how much of it right now you've changed your system, right? You're going with Isolo. And one name you notably didn't mention is Brandon Clark, who I think does fit the Isolo system. I just think
coming off the injury, well. I think that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. Also does fit the system very well.
Right.
Everybody's in need of athletic, long scoring wings, the way that Gigi Jackson has the potential there.
We're talking about draft week trades right now. We're not talking about something that might happen a month from now. I'm not trading Brandon Clark till I have Jared Jackson's name on a piece of paper.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I'm not doing that. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point. That's a very good point. What do we think about the Kevin Durant trade? Kevin Durant headed to the Houston Rockets.
I want to rewind one last point on that because it made me think about it after the Jaren thing out. That's the subtext to look for on draft night for the Grizzlies. Does something happen that is an indicator of what's happening with Jaren?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If they move the Conchar money, that tells you what's happening or what they think is happening. If they don't do anything at all draft night to free up any money, that doesn't necessarily mean the Jaren thing's not happening, but it raises an eyebrow about it.
110%.
So I think that is maybe the most important thing to look for at draft night is not who they take at 16, but what happens to the cap sheet by the end of the night.
What are the chances? I would set this bar extremely low that they do nothing different. That they just take at their picks at the spots that they're at, and that's the end of it. They take someone at 16. They take 2 picks. Like
It is both the easiest thing to do, and it definitely, I agree with you, feels like the least likely thing.
No, because they never do nothing.
That's right.
Never do nothing, right? They're involved in everything, it feels like. It is both the easiest thing and the least likely. All right, Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant going to division rival Houston. They sent out, Jalen Green. You're going to have to help me here.
Our old pal Dylan Brooks,
Jalen Green.
the 10th pick in this draft.
10th pick in this
and
draft.
5 future second rounders.
5 future seconds. So I was seeing online people saying the Grizzlies got more for Desmond Bane than the Suns got for
Desmond
Kevin
Bane's
Durant.
more than 10 years younger and is under contract for 4 more years at a lower price, right?
Yes. Does this trade make Houston better?
I think it does. I mean, there's some risk there. I mean, there's the health risk. Durant's 38 and he misses games and there's all of that. He also has a tendency to be unhappy places and things get sort of messed up. But I think if he's healthy, this is a really good spot for him. Houston basically, they signed Jalen Green to that contract with the intent of trading Jalen Green. And yet he was still, I think, their leading scorer maybe last year, points per game. So they basically dramatically upgraded their go-to scorer on that team from Jalen Green to Kevin Durant. And Dylan Brooks, they'll miss, but they got Tari Eason ready to step right in. They got Amin Thompson. They have so much infrastructure defensively on that team that you take that defense, you add Kevin Durant to the top of it. The thing I would wonder about them is twofold. One, they were the 2nd seed in the West last year in the regular season, and they just didn't have the guy who could get them buckets. Now you add the guy who could give them buckets to that. But if you're trying to win a title, is Kevin Durant at age 38 going to make it through an 82-game season and 4 rounds of playoffs? Look at Steph Curry last year, right? I really wonder about that. And I wonder about, are they giving him an extension? And if so, what is it? Kevin Durant on that team next season, I like. Kevin Durant with a 2-year, $120 million extension on top of it, I don't like so much. And so that's what I wonder about with them.
Steven Adams knew it was coming because he re-upped, team-friendly deal.
Yeah.
He must like it there in Houston. Old friend Steven Adams. But yeah, I think that just made the division better. Not that we're paying attention to that, but they are going to play more games. They're going to play more games against Houston and San Antonio than other teams, and those aren't fun games to play.
It's a really interesting trade to look at through a Grizzlies prism, because on one side of it, you could say, man, you just made a team we're trying to compete with in our own division better next season. On the other side of it, the Grizzlies probably have the Phoenix's pick next summer. And I think on paper, the Suns are 11th or 12th in the West.
Is Booker going to go?
I doubt it, because they don't really control their draft.
If he was, should Memphis be interested?
The problem there, I guess, is my short answer to that. My longer answer is I don't have hoops hype up. I was going to pull up the contract. His contract's big. It's bigger than the Desmond Bane deal. I think it's $50 million a year for going out. And so the fact that the contract's that big and he and Morant gives you even more defensive problems than Bane and Morant would, which they just got away from, I'm skeptical that would happen ultimately.
So where do we?
But Devin Booker's really good.
Where do we project Phoenix going into next season? Given that they were what? They were a second apron team, right? So now they're definitely going to be trying to get off of more money, right? They're not going to be done with just Kevin Durant, you would guess.
Yeah, but the Durant thing was less a money thing than a Kevin Durant doesn't want to be here thing. And so I don't know. That ownership is so weird. I don't know how aggressive they're going to be on the money side. Like I look at the West, and like Utah is obviously the worst team in the West on paper. And then after that, I don't know, like how many teams are worse than Phoenix on paper? Maybe New Orleans, maybe Portland, but I don't think so. Maybe Sacramento. Like the Suns might be. They were 11th last year. They may be going down. They may be 12th or 13th in the West. In which case, like the Grizzlies are going to get a top 10 pick if that happens.
Is there anything else we should update in terms of like we talked a little bit about the Santi stuff last week? I haven't heard anything new on that.
Things have been very quiet around a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I have not heard much on that. I do wonder about like there's already people picking up that we said we had heard a few teams would be interested.
Well, Detroit got reported by somebody.
Yeah, Detroit is definitely out there.
And we've just heard chatter about other teams. But
are there any players on any of those teams that would interest you in terms of like a sign and trade type of deal? We're talking Washington, Atlanta, Detroit. Is there anybody coming back? Like, does Isaiah Stewart interest you?
I think that's the most obvious name of players from those teams. I mean, they've got a starting center already in Jalen Duren. Isaiah Stewart would I think help the Grizzlies, especially in the short term. He's not a classic center, but he's a bulky, like 6'8", 6'9" guy. He and Jaren can play together in a starting front court, so I think you could do that. And then, Brandon Clark will come back, or he'll be available. Zach Edey will come back, but you're moving Santi out, and so I don't love that necessarily. I think you're losing a lot of shooting from your front court there. I think once Edey comes back, I would rather have Santi Aldama than Isaiah Stewart. He's a good player and a good contract. I don't see anything from Washington unless you really like Corey Kispert, which I don't.
There are people that I do think that the Grizzlies have a shooting need now.
Yes.
It doesn't help your defensive issues
there.
But if you're going to say goodbye to Luke Kennard and Desmond Bane, I wouldn't mind them adding some sort of shooter. Beasley is obviously probably not an option here, but
he's an unrestricted free agent. It sounds like he's going to go back to Detroit.
Yeah.
But the Santi thing is interesting because middle of the season last year, I would have told you the Grizzlies are really high on Santi. They're just re-signing Santi. He'll be back, right? Like I think they could have traded Santi at the deadline. They may if they were willing to trade Santi and a first-round pick or two, maybe Cam Johnson's on this team.
I think Santi desires to be back too, by the way.
But I think the way things went, a lot of things went poorly for the Grizzlies down the stretch of the season. But I think, and obviously there was the moment that was captured on somebody's cell phone of Desmond Bane and Santi or whatever. But I think that's just one little thing. But I do think it was indicative of some general displeasure with the level of Santi's defense and physicality down the stretch of the season and into the postseason. And I don't know how much that colors what team perception was earlier in the season. I personally, I think Santi's good, and I 24-year-old 7-footer who can handle and shoot and play above the rim. I'd be bringing him back unless there's some sign and trade out there that really brings back something I'm interested in.
Last thing we can wrap up here. NBA Finals are over. The Thunder won in 7 games.
Man,
Can I take us on a little detour here?
Yeah. Is it going to be a somber one?
No, I've got a question.
You get on a black armband for Tyrese Halliburton's Achilles tendon.
This is about basketball watching. It's not even this is a terrible podcast topic, but it's a detour. Okay, I want to know if I'm petty because I'm about to be in a wedding next year. It's one of my best friends who used to live in Memphis, but is originally from Oklahoma City, who's a big OKC fan.
Right.
Been an OKC fan his whole life. And
you're trying to decide which Grizzlies jersey to wear to the wedding? Is that it?
No.
A Tony Allen or Heart Grind t-shirt?
The hilarious thing is he was also the best man at my wedding, and he gave me a ton of crap for being overly negative about Alabama football all the time. And then I have texts from him after game 6 saying, this is over. They're going to lose the series, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And then sure enough, they went on to win. So I've got ammunition, but that's not my question. My question is, because this kind of dates back all the way to my childhood. Did you ever feel like you wanted to cheer against your friends' favorite teams because you didn't want them to have happiness that you can't have?
Honestly, no, not quite that. Not quite. Now, I believe in negative fandom. And so cheering against more than cheering for, I do believe in that, and I have done that, but it's not directed at one specific person in my life. It's more geared.
Natalie thinks this is really funny.
It's more geared towards like I dislike Oklahoma City more than I like anyone. So I'm rooting against the Thunder, but it's not about like some person I know.
Maybe I'm
or like I always root against the Cowboys no matter who they play. I root against the Yankees no matter who they play. So I believe in negative rooting. I believe in letting your anger fuel you in terms of who you root for or don't, but I can't think of an instance where I've directed that fandom towards like a person I care about.
Yeah, maybe I'm a terrible person.
No, it's
like
petty,
this is like, because like even back when I was a kid, like my best friends that I would play basketball on the street with when I was younger, and I remember this was like, they were all LeBron fans. They loved LeBron. LeBron was on the Heat. I cheered against the Heat every single time.
Okay, so
I do not want them to win the championship.
So I do have something like this. It's not about an individual person, but it is about a contrarian impulse. I grew up in Arkansas, where everyone growing up was a St. Louis Cardinals fan. And the first World Series I was conscious of was Cardinals Brewers. I'm wearing a Brewers cap right now. I'm wearing a Brewers cap right now because I rooted for the Brewers, the first baseball team I ever rooted for, and I rooted for them only because they were playing the St. Louis Cardinals. Everyone in my family was rooting for the Cardinals, and my attitude was, we don't live in St. Louis. Why do we have to root for the St. Louis Cardinals? Screw this. I'm rooting for the Brewers. And to this day, I'm wearing a Brewers cap. So I do feel that.
Well, anyway, so I found myself watching the finals game, and I was very torn because this friend of mine ended up getting super lucky and was given a ticket to game 7. And so he was at the game. He put on his shirt. I told him, actually, I talked to him on the phone before we went in the game. I told him, you should not put on the shirt just so you get on the Jumbotron to be told to put on the shirt and then put on the shirt and let everybody cheer for you.
We learned that going to the playoff games. These are the people who don't put on the shirts initially, they don't actually not want to put on the shirt. They are attention seekers. They want to get on the Jumbotron.
The OKC shirt thing is weird for me, okay? It's just a little weird. It's somebody put it like, I forget, I want to give credit to whoever said it. It might have been Vernon. Somebody said it was like AI, like the crowd looked like AI. And I'm like, I can't get that out of my head.
I said on this pod, it reminded me of the stadium scenes from Dune.
Yeah, seriously. It's just
like the white section and the black section, and they're all everyone looks the same. And,
it's just, I don't know. It's a little much for me. But anyway, and so I was trying to decide watching game 7 whether I was going to cheer for the Pacers to win, which would have been an incredible story, amazing, especially after what happened with the Halliburton injury, or and then that would have just been the best storyline and most fun outcome in my eyes. Or if the Thunder were to win, or if the Thunder were to lose, I should say, then my best friend would be totally inconsolable and be very annoying about it probably for weeks. Yeah, no, I wouldn't like that either, though. So I found myself in a very...
Well, I have no Thunder fans in my life, and my whole family was all in on the Pacers. And I will... To me, the Pacers are still the people's champs.
Yeah.
The Thunder get the rings, the Pacers get the glory, the Pacers get the love. They are the people's champs.
I did feel... I mean, who doesn't feel terrible for Halliburton? But it's
100%.
just... It's such a terrible spot to be in if you're him, especially given, like, the... Mamba mentality culture that exists in the NBA now, because either he plays in that game, he ends up getting hurt at the calf strain. We've seen it happen time and time again now that results in an Achilles pop, or he doesn't play in the game and his teammates look at him like, dude, it's game 7, get on the court, and everybody else calls him soft because he's not playing in the game. So he's in a lose-lose spot. I feel bad for him about that.
I think this was such a special circumstance that I don't even think it's game 7 of the NBA Finals. I don't think, to me, that's not a Kobe Mamba mentality thing. That is like anybody's playing in that circumstance if they can, even knowing the likelihood. In fact, I heard an interesting theory. Nate Duncan was talking this morning. If you noted, the Pacers during the middle of the finals made a trade, and they traded their pick this year at number 23 to the New Orleans Pelicans to get their own pick, the Pacers' own pick next season back, like in 2026. But that trade made sense when they did it because they're trying to re-sign Miles Turner this summer and you want to clear some cap space. You get the first round cap hold off your book. But Nate theorized, is there a chance they knew, obviously they knew Halliburton was playing hurt. Is there a chance they thought, I mean, he's putting himself at risk. It may go poorly. We should have our pick just in case and make sure we have that 2026 pick back because if, next season could be a lost season for us. That's probably not true, but that was interesting to me.
Yeah. Man, he's probably not going to see the basketball court again until 2027.
No, I mean, it's a rough spot, but most players never get to an NBA Finals, period. Fewer still get to a game where if you win the game, you win the title. And like that is the reason you're in the NBA, in addition to making money, which he already has a lot of. That is the reason you're there, to play in a game that decides a title. Credit
to the Pacers who created a much better series than I foresaw at the beginning.
Yep.
And OKC, man. OKC looked, obviously they're not going anywhere. They're going to be really good. They're going to be really tough to deal with for a long time. I don't love watching the way that they play basketball. It's not my favorite, not my favorite team to watch, but they are extremely talented. They also had moments where they looked vulnerable in that series, and you didn't know if that was going to be the case. You thought there was a chance that they were just going to steamroll Indiana, and Indiana played a really good series. So maybe that gives a little hope for the future, knowing that OKC is going to be really awesome for a really long time. Anything else? Anything we missed?
No, it's going to be an interesting, next week and a half. Could stretch out longer than that, but the draft Wednesday, Thursday, the NBA offseason will officially start on Monday, 5 p.m. Central is when the curtain will rise and teams are allowed to negotiate.
Yeah.
And so we'll start getting information. Whether we get any from the Grizzlies, who knows? But there'll be transactions around the league that will start happening Monday, and then maybe before then. We should have, the Drew Holiday trade happen, this morning or last night or whatever. And so there'll definitely be, movement around the draft too. So I think we're going to know a lot more about the future of the Memphis Grizzlies a week from today, really a week from tomorrow, since this is Monday, than we do right now. The next week is going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah. So crazy thing is, we've got, like you said, Monday night is when the Shams bombs are going to start dropping.
Right.
Then right after that, we've got 4th of July holiday. But we've got Summer League starting on the 5th, 7th, and 8th from Salt Lake City. I believe we're still waiting on the schedule in Vegas, which is, it's nuts that we're 2 weeks out. We still don't have a schedule of games yet. So we're going to have Grizzlies basketball at that point as well, in addition to all of the free agency and stuff that's coming along. So, going to be a fun week. Chris is back in town for the draft, which is awesome. We did bring our poster board, our markers, all those things over here today. We got the project done, so
ready for the presentation.
We are ready for the presentation. Make sure you go check out the Daily Memphian tomorrow for our draft coverage on Wednesday. We're recording this on Tuesday. You can go back and listen to our draft podcast from last week, in which we named some players that we like, and make sure you are reading everything else over at the Daily Memphian as well. I know we've got lots of coverage of the death of Fred Smith and all sorts of different things across the city. So go check that out. But until next time, for Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.
Memphis moves fast. Stay ahead with the Daily Memphian. Get breaking news, sports, politics, and restaurant openings from expert local reporters. Delivered twice daily to your inbox. Stay informed. Stay connected. Stay local.